Hello, I am Teresa Moore, and I'm going to provide a presentation on the importance of adding language objectives to a lesson plan, and also provide some steps on how to accomplish this. To begin the presentation, I would like to paraphrase a statement from the article, How to Scaffold ESL's Student Writing by Margaret Williams, who says, "Best practices for teaching writing and composition skills to native speakers is also best practice for English language learners. The only difference is that some of the strategies will need to be altered depending upon the needs of individual students." Before I begin the presentation today, I want to explain how I'm going to present this information. I have approximately 14 slides that I will be going over, and you are welcome to take notes as I go through each of the slides. At the end of the presentation, I'm going to provide you with a URL to my blog, and this presentation will be posted on the blog. You are welcome to go to the blog and post any questions that you might have in the comments section of the blog, and I'll be happy to answer those questions for you. Let's begin the presentation today with this question. What are language objectives? Well, language objectives are lesson objectives that are specifically designed to promote students' language development in the 4 domains. And the 4 domains are listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Language objectives can be developed from various sources. They can be taken from state or district language arts standards. They can be created based upon WIDA or ELP standards, and they can also be created based upon student needs. Content objectives and language objectives can be and are often integrated. Here's an example of a content objective. This content objective reads, "Students will compare and contrast 2 characters in a reading selection." A follow-up on that is this language objective. The language objective says, "Students will write a compare and contrast paragraph using vocabulary associated with the language function of compare and contrast." It's important to note that effectively written language objectives are linked to standards-based content objectives, that they use active verbs to explain a specific student task, they specify target language necessary to complete the task, and they also emphasize development of expressive language skills such as speaking and writing. When writing language objectives for English acquisition, it's important to remember that language objectives should go from simple to complex, that the objectives can occur over several lessons, and there should be a focus on students practicing reading, writing, listening, and speaking while learning content. And also the objectives should link evaluation and assessment together. I am writing a lesson plan for an ELL student pertaining to writing a personal narrative, and the Kentucky Common Core English Standard that pertains to writing that personal narrative is this: write narratives to reflect real or imagined experiences or events using effective technique, well-chosen details, and well-structured event sequence. Standard 3 of that core content indicates that a student would use precise words and phrases, telling details, and sensory language to convey a vivid picture of the experiences, events, setting, and or characters as they are writing that personal narrative. This slide reflects the performance level of a student based upon the student's access scores for the WIDA ELP standards. And for this particular student, based upon their student access scores, it indicates that the student would be able to function or perform between or at level 1 and level 2. What this means is that this particular student would be able to do these performances. The student would be able to copy key points about language learning and check them with a partner, and those key points might be use of capital letters for days of the week and or months of the year. At level 2, the student would be able to check use of newly acquired language and share that with a partner. Some of that newly acquired language would be through spell or grammar check or the use of a dictionary. Before I move on to this slide, it's important that we restate what we've done thus far, and in essence what we've shown is that the core content standards can be aligned to the WIDA English Language Proficiency Standards. In this particular slide we have what's known as the WIDA Can-Do descriptors, and these descriptors that are shown here are for grade level 9 through 12. As I've indicated earlier, I'm preparing a lesson plan for a student who fits this grade level and whose access scores demonstrated that this particular student was performing at or near between level 1 and level 2. What that means is that this student would be able to perform these academic actions. The student would be able to match visual representations to words or phrases. The student would also be able to respond to WH questions that are related to an illustrated text. And of course those WH questions could be who, what, when, and where, why, and so on. This next slide is just a representation of the can-do descriptors for a student who is at level 2 in academic performance for the given grade level of 9 through 12. And it does state that for the given level of English language proficiency and with visual, graphic, or interactive support through level 4, English language learners can process or produce the language needed to, at level 2, that particular student would be able to match sentence level descriptions to visual representations. We have described how language objectives can align with core content standards and WIDA English Language Proficiency Standards. It's time to focus on the lesson plan. This slide, titled Creation's Comprehensible Input, refers to a theory that states that learners progress in their knowledge of the language when they comprehend language input that is slightly more advanced than their current level. This is also known as the I+1 hypothesis. What this means is that an English language learner who is at level 1 would benefit from language input that is slightly more advanced than that level 1. In other words, they would benefit from level 2, and those at level 2 would benefit from level 3. For this particular student who's performing between 1 and 2, if they were doing work from level 3, it might involve this: ordering paragraphs or sequencing information within paragraphs. This slide shows the language objectives for the lesson plan. The objectives are: student will write a personal narrative using regular and irregular past tense verbs. The student will write using correct English conventions. And the student will write using details. This slide shows how the language objective is integrated to the core content. It's connecting to the Kentucky core content that says, write a narrative to reflect real or imagined experiences using effective techniques, details, and well-structured event. Each content lesson should involve some strategies for teaching the lesson. In this particular lesson, I'll be using scaffolding, and some of the scaffolding strategies are using graphic organizers to allow for sequencing of events, teaching new vocabulary by using the visual thesaurus, also providing a word bank of common regular and irregular past tense verbs. I included the Sheltered Instruction Observation Protocol as an alternative or an additional source. This concludes the plan. I want to thank you for listening, and this is a link to my blog.